Do you need a lobotomy? I'm pretty sure Gidget needs a lobotomy. I should probably have a mic. You know,
Yeah.
for the sake of recording a show, I should probably be at least able to be heard. Let me see.
Probably.
I'm pretty sure Gidget needs a lobotomy.
Okay. Dun, 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 dun.
All right.
As we wrestle with all our stuff here.
Mic'd up. I always forget when I put my hair up in a bun. Like, there's nowhere for the headphones to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure that's not a problem you have, but
when I put my hair up.
When you put your hair up.
When it
the bun is
goes
in the
all
way.
sultry. Okay, so yeah.
Are we live?
Yeah, we are live.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
We're gonna kick it old school today.
Yeah, it's just us.
I have to say, I'm so excited to do an old school show where we're just jam about a subject.
Yeah, we've got lots of news. Most of the news is old news. Of course, Dozer has joined us in here because if not, then
she will have joined us vocally anyway.
Yeah, from the other side of the door or the floor or down the street or wherever she's at. So right now
Dozer.
She's looking at.
She's such a Dozer.
Anyway, so yeah, we've got some news today. We've got today we're talking about lobotomies, kind of the history, and some notable lobotomized figures in history, and it's
such an interesting subject.
Yeah, it's gruesome, but that doesn't mean it hasn't had some positive effects on some people.
No.
Well,
no, I don't believe it has. I think it may have had positive effects on science,
and
like
people
the elimination effect, like eliminate this, it doesn't work.
It's kind of like killing someone with them still being around.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I don't know. We'll have to get into it afterwards.
But first.
Yeah. We've got some news. So
yes, our favorite part of the show, weird news.
Yeah, it is a good, interesting news week, and a lot of it is local Utah news, and most people have probably heard from most of these stories, but I'm gonna knock this one up right now. The world's largest and possibly oldest living organism resides in Utah.
Yeah, I dig this story because it exemplifies, one, how little we know, and two, how interconnected things are that we don't imagine they are.
Yeah. What weighs 13 million pounds, has been around since at least the last ice age, is the largest living organism on Earth, and until 50 years ago, nobody knew it was there.
Yeah.
So, the Pando Aspen Grove.
They named it Pando. I love that.
Yeah. In south central Utah. So it's down by Richfield.
It's on the Fish Lake Highway, yeah.
Yeah. But they tested the aspens, and they're all clones of a single root.
Yes.
So they're all interconnected.
They're all connected by one gigantic root system.
Yeah, this is like that documentary with the blue aliens. What was that called?
I can't remember, but I know.
Where the guy got put into the blue alien skin.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Avatar.
Yeah, this is like that documentary Avatar.
Documentary.
But yeah, the 47,000 aspens you see are actually the same tree.
It's one tree that has gone underground and sprouted up all of these other
Anywhere
trunks.
It wants to get some sunlight, it just pops a sprout.
Dude, that's amazing.
And then like you see in the background, there'll be a little dead one. That's just a part of it that's like flaky skin, I guess, or split end on the head. But that is wild. One single organism.
So crazy.
The equivalent of 90 football fields
Yeah.
or half a dozen city creek centers.
Now, we have known for a very long time that aspen trees do proliferate this way. We've known that for a long time, but what I think is cool is they went the extra step to identify the size of this organism.
Well, now they've tested this, are they going to test aspen groves all over the world now?
They may. We may be unseated in our largest living organism seat.
We better get a dang medal quick. Because, yeah, that's
a cool story.
Yes, that's
I dig it.
That's a good one. And all right, so we'll lead off with one more news story, and then we have three more that I'll just
I have one too that we'll do just before we get started on lobotomies.
Okay, well, let's go with yours that we've got right now.
Okay, so mine's interesting because it's like a lobotomy from the other side.
A bumbotomy?
a rectotomy or something?
Lobotomy.
Okay, so this happened. It's a Chinese man, and it is in Jinzhou, which is East China's province. He was suffering from constipation.
Okay.
And so he was inspired by this folk remedy, which says it will help produce a bowel movement. So he inserted a 20-centimeter eel into his rectum via his anus.
Did it rectum?
It bit through. It managed to move from his rectum and bite a hole through his colon and enter his abdomen. Now, he says the story says he was initially too shy to go see a doctor, but the severe pain he was experiencing drove him to the hospital. The eel was still alive when it was removed from the man's abdomen.
Okay, give me a minute. So he was constipated.
PETA, I'm talking to you. We have got to protect the eels. Apparently, the idea was the eels...
It's like reverse ice fishing.
Yes. The eel's movement inside would relieve the constipation.
But then you got to push an eel out.
I'm just following his logic.
Is this a common thing?
It's an old folk remedy. And for those of you who are like, well, that's gross, go look at a picture of an eel.
Imagine the witch doctor who has to slide it in there.
I mean,
imagine the guy. Okay, and the next thing, do you lay on some old witchy like labor table with your feet in stirrups, or do you have to do like a
do you assume
headstand?
The position? How did he? Okay, was it done by force? Did he tape it to a stick to keep it from wiggling away from certain destruction? Or do eels like this? Did he just go, oh yeah, it looks great, and swim right up there? I don't know, but it makes me nervous to swim with eels, obviously. Like, what if one sees mine and is like, hey, that looks good, and swims right up there? And B, I'm a little confused because eels are kind of wiggly.
They're bendy.
Yeah. So how?
And then it bit through and was swimming around inside of his...
through his colon. And it was in his abdomen.
And so then, did the guy live?
Yeah. Now, the doctor who conducted the operation said that the patient could have lost his life.
And laughed.
Because the bacteria in the large intestine now has like this big gaping hole that apparently is large enough for an eel to fit through, that it can spill into your abdomen, which can cause all kinds of like septic infection. But okay, if the eel can bite through things, what are you doing putting it in your anus?
I've got a few more questions. You know how witch doctors have like a drum, like tribal music they play. Do you
As
think-
the eel's being introduced.
Do you think maybe they swapped that over for some Barry White?
Oh, let's get it on.
Huh?
I don't know.
Huh?
Do you freeze the eel? Is it like semi-frozen state? Listen, I'm all about like the physicality of how this happens.
If any listeners out there want to do deeper research into this, and we will definitely like to invite you on to break it down for us.
Yes, but don't really.
that
It bit through
research-
his rectum.
That
It
research.
bit a hole the size of an eel because it then went through that hole.
That was probably.
Did it bite several times? Holy crap. Did it chew?
That would have to be the gentlest part of that surgery, Betsy.
Oh, I can't handle it.
That's like bringing on the leeches.
I can't handle it.
Okay. Get on with lobotomies, because
Yeah.
that was
So lobotomies are from the other side,
Yeah.
causing arguably damage. So the lobotomy itself was hailed by New York Times at one point as surgery of the soul, a groundbreaking medical procedure that promised hope to the most the most distressed mentally ill patients and their families. Now, it did, however, begin as an operation of last resort, but it was soon being performed at some 50 state asylums, in most cases to devastating results. And we're not talking a long time ago, people. 1980 was the last lobotomy.
we were both alive.
We were both alive.
Yeah.
So now Walter Freeman is a neurologist. I didn't know this, but neurologists actually cannot perform surgery. So he is hailed as the lobotomist. He is hailed as the person who did the most lobotomies, but he never actually performed a single one.
Did he just?
He oversaw them
Mm.
because he did not have the credentials to actually perform the surgery. He is also decried as a moral monster. And the lobotomy is now seen as one of the most barbaric mistakes of modern medicine.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So today the word lobotomy is rarely mentioned. If it is, it's the butt of a joke. Like, oh, that dude needs a lobotomy. Or sometimes people will say, how are you doing? And I'll say, oh, I need a freaking lobotomy. But in the 20th century, the lobotomy...
Now the 20th century is the 19th century. Is the 1900s.
The 1900s. Yes.
To be clear.
So when I would think of lobotomy prior to like really diving into it, I would think like, really like 1800s.
You would think that.
Yeah. Like this is so barbaric. I mean, it's an ice pick, people,
Mhm.
Being rammed, or a hand drill. Oh, I can't.
Well, let's go into it real quick of what the recent lobotomies were. Is they had a long spear, and I'll show the picture on the screen as I talk about this. They had a long spear. They would insert it just to the inside of your eye. Just right inside next to your nose. They would break through the ocular cavity of your cranium
Mhm.
into the frontal lobe, and then they would kind of damage that frontal lobe. They would wiggle it around and damage that frontal lobe to your brain has different areas that has developed through our evolution. You've heard the lizard brain, and that's down at the bottom in the middle. And then and I would argue that's not even the lizard brain, because lizards have more thought than that, but that's our worm brain kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you go out and forward, you go deeper into modern humans. or modern animals even. And the furthest forward and the furthest top is towards the outside is thought to be where the most advanced thinking areas are.
The most recent advancements in thinking. And another thing to remember is that the brains we see out of the skull are a solid kind of muscly
fatty
material. Inside the skull, we have to remember that they are not like that. When a brain is removed and wants to be examined outside of the skull, they add a compound that solidifies it into its shape.
Peanut butter.
Yeah, whatever it is.
It's just much peanut butter into it.
But
it's all technical.
Inside the skull, if you can imagine, a brain inside the skull, if you were to pick it up, it would run through your fingertips. It's very liquid.
I have on animals handled brains before, and they would be the consistency of not chilled long enough Jello.
Yes.
Sorry to ruin everyone who is in Utah.
I didn't want to say that.
Eats an abundance of Jello. But
yes. I avoided the Jello connection because I like Jello.
Yeah.
Not so much anymore.
I've used it in working with hides, and so it is a mayonnaise would be a good one. I don't know why I keep reverting to food, trying to ruin everyone's week.
But it's not. When you think of the brain, we think of the brains we have seen outside of the skull, and they hold them and move them about. It's not like that. It's really not. So the lobotomy in the beginning was not what it is today. In the beginning, it was actually started by a gentleman who also could not perform the surgery. Oh, strange.
Well, it's almost like the brain specialists were kept separate from the surgeons who would do it.
So it was started as, they called it a leucotomy, and it was Antonio Egas Moniz, and he was from Portugal. He studied medicine, but he served as a lecturer and a neuroscientist, not a neurosurgeon. And he became later a neurology professor at the University of Lisbon, where he worked until he retired. Now, Moniz thought that mental illness originated from the abnormal neural connections in the frontal lobe, like Jared was talking about, where evolution has evolved incorrectly, so creating these abnormal connections in the frontal lobe. And he described a fixation on synapses, which in mental illness was expressed as, predominant obsessive ideas, as that it was just a missing connection. It wasn't experiences in life. It wasn't, your upbringing. That was it. It was a missing connection. In addition, he observed changes in character and personality among soldiers who had suffered from injuries to their frontal lobes. So that then validated that if someone suffers an injury, that connection may have been there before, that nerve connection may have been there before, but it was no longer there. And he hypothesized that surgically removing white matter fibers from the frontal lobe would improve the mental illness that was being exhibited in the patient. So he would have his surgeons drill holes and then extract brain matter from the frontal lobe, slice it, and take it out. Now, he enlisted his longtime staff members and neurosurgeon Almeida.
So it would look like spaghetti then as it come out.
Yes. It was almost like a biopsy tool that he used. So they would drill the hole, and they weren't going through the eye sockets like the current lobotomy. They would drill.
The most recent. Let's hope there's not current lobotomies. I'm sure there are
somewhere.
vast world.
I'm telling
Let's
you.
hope it's not happening in here.
So he would have them drill a hole, and then with a tool similar to a biopsy tool, he would go in and take out slices of the brain. Well, he wouldn't, but he would have his surgeons do that. Now, they first started by testing the procedure on a group of 20 patients, mainly with schizophrenia, anxiety, and depression. And these surgeries took place one of two ways: under general anesthesia and no anesthesia.
Mm.
The first psychosurgery was performed in 1935 on a 63-year-old woman with depression. Depression, people. Anxiety.
Imagine if they still use that today. How many people purport are on treatments for depression? If that was one of the treatments, it'd be like a zombie apocalypse out on the street.
It's insane. So the patient was experiencing depression and anxiety and some insomnia. The patient experienced a rapid physical recovery, meaning the hole sealed up, there wasn't a lot of infection, those kinds of physical recoveries. And 2 months later, the psychiatrist noted that she was calmer. And so it was considered a win. Not that she had less depression.
Was she still able to function?
Well, that's the thing. They never followed up.
So
with
they
the
didn't
patients.
care whether there
No.
was any life after.
Nope.
They made a vegetable, possibly, I don't know.
So the leucotomy, as described, had a needle-like instrument with a retractable kind of wire loop, and they would rotate the wire loop and kind of twist that part of the brain, and then they would surgically extract it.
So it was like a toilet bowl snake.
It was like a toilet bowl snake.
That's what it reminds me of.
Now, this procedure actually got him quite a bit of fame. He received the Nobel Prize for his discovery of the therapeutic value of leucotomy in certain psychosis. Now, critics, understanding the complications, there was no documentation provided following these because he wasn't following up with the patients. And it was this work that led to Walter Jackson Freeman here in the United States to adopt a modified technique. Now, since the winning of this Nobel Prize, I think it's wise to note that the relatives of some lobotomy victims are trying to get the Nobel Committee to rescind the award, considering the incredible amount of damage the procedure has done. Unfortunately, the Nobel Committee has flatly refused the idea and instead wrote a comprehensive rebuttal of why their decisions should stand. For starters, they believe it was still a better alternative at the time than other schizophrenia treatments. And they believe he was still advanced for his day, so they don't argue that their award was in error.
Well, they gave a peace prize to Barack Obama.
Yes. It makes me question this whole Nobel thing. Like, people give it so much weight.
I mean, Obama did take us from 2 wars to 7.
Yeah. What's peaceful about that?
But and they're probably real shy about rescinding, saying, oh, we were wrong. As most humans are.
Yeah. So the idea that mental health could be improved by psychosurgery or the leucotomy, it's said that Moniz took this information from Swiss neurologist Gottlieb Burckhardt. And Gottlieb Burckhardt, although not doing it the same way, operated on 6 patients and reported a 50% success rate and a 50% death rate. Meaning 50% of the patients appeared to calm down, the other 50 died.
And let's just take a moment.
There's nothing more calm than dead.
Let's take a moment about and chat about schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Schizophrenia is not a crazy person running around killing people or anything else.
No.
It's not any of that. And it runs a spectrum of hearing voices, seeing images,
It could
things
be
like
as
that.
little as paranoia.
And it could be quite small. And who knows exactly where it comes from. I have my own thoughts on where I think it comes from. And it's exemplified by drug use and abuse and things like that, has always stretched schizophrenia further. And maybe sometimes schizophrenia, how do I say this? Maybe it causes people to do good in the world. Like if they hear good voices, help
Sure.
that cat in the tree and,
Sure.
things like that. So
it never presents itself the same way.
And it's not like he was killing, like this guy's a mass murderer and he's doing this to people who are experiencing maybe audible sounds or spotty vision or stuff. And man, I mean,
Can
it
you
could be like a
imagine?
brain tumor in some of them or something.
Uh-huh.
Or even a tumor in their neck that's impinging on their circulatory system, or a clot, or a stroke, or an aneurysm. I mean, so many things.
The current medical field still doesn't know to the 100th degree whether schizophrenia is a symptom of something else or a standalone issue. And that's why the current medical community treat the symptoms and not necessarily the schizophrenia.
Well, they may not know what the schizophrenia is for sure.
Yeah. Where did it originate? So the lobotomy in America, we have to recognize that most lobotomies happened in America.
Yeah.
1936, psychiatrist Walter Freeman and another neurosurgeon performed the first U.S. prefrontal lobotomy on a Kansas housewife. Now, Freeman, you have to understand where he's coming from, because he called Moniz's work brilliant. And he said things like, the work of Moniz, its importance can't scarcely be overestimated. He had like this professional crush on him, calling him a sheer genius. And Freeman and Moniz actually...
Oh, Captain, my Captain.
Yes. They actually connected personally and formed like this lobotomy club where they would speak and share ideas. And Moniz mentored him. Freeman was, as described by everyone, relentless in his exploration of mental health issues as organic, meaning as a physical issue that could be managed by a physical intervention. Simply said, scramble the wiring, correct the issue. Now, Freeman also believed that an overload of emotions led to mental illness. So if you're feeling a lot of emotions, you actually develop a mental illness because of that. And he believed that cutting certain nerves in the brain could eliminate this emotion and therefore stabilize the personality.
Let's remember, this is the time and the place where eugenics was born and practiced.
Yes.
The evil stuff that was sent over to most expressively Nazi Germany was born here and practiced here and shipped from here to there.
Yeah.
Eugenics comes from the U.S.
Yeah.
It comes from the U.S. in the late 1800s, and it in the 1930s was extremely popular. It was believed and kind of sought after by everyone that undesirables should be just eliminated. There was a dream of making, and this is here in the U.S. I'm not preaching about those Nazis over there. I'm preaching about us.
They adopted it from us.
It was a dream that you could make, society could make the perfect human. And
amongst that, there was an entire dichotomy built that I think some still exist today, likely lots, that determined what was desirable and undesirable.
And we're starting to see some glimpses, some sparkles of that same idea coming back now.
Mm-hmm.
And we're starting to see some of those things happening now. And so that's kind of scary. It's kind of scary when governments, which is populated by some of the worst people.
It's like we're not learning our
Yeah.
lessons.
Yeah.
We're not.
Yeah.
People,
and I mean, we
read
could
a
go
history book.
We could go on a whole tirade. I know I've made it expressly known on my other show about how I don't like this forced vaccine thing. But how the Nazis got the Jews into ghettos was through a disease scare, through typhus.
Yep.
They said, oh, the Jews seem to carry more typhus. We need to separate them from the rest of society. Then we need to put a stamp on them. And then we need to move them into their own little villages. And once that's done, there's no more human connection with them. And then you move them into camps. And now, Australia's building camps.
And how do you reconnect a society that you have worked so hard to separate? You create a divide so vast by separating them that reconnection, I would say, on a grand level is impossible.
Yeah.
If it is possible, we haven't seen it in practice yet.
Well, that society has to be destroyed and ripped in two halves, one half being a capitalist half, the other half being a communist half. The communist half shows them how horrible life can be. And they have to suffer with that for about 35 years, mass starvation. They build a wall. They call it the anti-fascist buffer wall, I think is what its name was. And they build a wall, but they build the wall saying we're keeping fascists out. But actually, there's a reason all our gun turrets point in because it becomes a prison. And then they stop feeding people. And then we have airflow. It's a whole to-do.
It's a whole thing.
It takes 60 years.
So Freeman is completely infatuated with Moniz, and he wants to find a more efficient way to perform the procedure without drilling into a head. Now, he did this not because he wanted a better outcome, not because he wanted an easier way. He did this because most asylums do not have surgical rooms.
Shocking.
When you're drilling and all of these other things that Moniz was doing, you have to have a surgical studio to do it in. You have to have a theater that is set up for surgery to do it in. His patients were mostly in asylums. They were in mental health facilities. Mental health facilities do not have surgical rooms. So he created the 10-minute transorbital lobotomy known as the ice pick lobotomy. That's the one that was most currently used through the orbital socket. And it was first performed at his Washington, D.C. office, a freaking doctor's office, on January 17th.
Just imagine, it had like a waiting room, some highlights magazines, this was, way back then. So it had some crappy curtains.
Some guy smoking in the corner.
They weren't in lime green. I'll bet the doctor was smoking
during the freaking thing.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking 1946 was the first one performed here in the United States. I know people born in 46.
I'll bet the colors of the office was a beige. Probably had a rough hewn carpet on it. Man, he wasn't wearing gloves, not then.
Time magazine was sitting out. They were reading it while they were getting their eye.
When did highlights come out? Because that's what I remember about every doctor's and dentist's office.
I don't know, but that's a Mormon thing.
Highlights is?
Yeah, that's only in Utah.
Huh. It's a kids magazine
more
for
you know.
those outside of Utah. It just has it's like
It's got cartoons in it.
it's like a cartoon book,
Word searches.
rated G, and
Yeah.
it's like if you went to Applebee's with your kid, they gave you 3 crayons and a book.
Yeah.
You know.
So Freeman would go on to perform 2,500 lobotomies. He was known as the showman. He once performed 25 lobotomies in one day. And to shock his audiences, he would also insert picks into both eyes simultaneously. And now.
It's like the X Games of lobotomy.
So, according to the NPR article that I did dig up, the procedure went as follows. As those who watched the procedure described it, a patient would be rendered semi-conscious by electroshock. Now, remember, we're not in a surgical center, so we can't administer general anesthesia.
So they would shock him and knock him out with
So they
shocker.
would, right. So it wouldn't render them completely unconscious. It would render them somewhat unconscious.
Subconscious-ish.
Yes. He would then take a sharp ice pick like instrument.
Now, let's go into the instrument real quick. The instrument wasn't just an ice pick. It was specifically
Right.
made
It's
and
not like
designed-
he reused an implement that they used for ice picking.
I'm sure he reused it from patient to patient, but it was a specific device. They could strike it on the back with a mallet, but it did have a handle for extraction. Also, it had a couple of bevels in it as measurement points. Because
depth measurement.
Yes, because he had a specific depth that he wanted to go to on specific persons.
Whack. Oops, too
Now,
far.
me and Betsy's head sizes are different, so it might be like a 1/4 inch difference between us. And then,
Yeah.
of course, there are children, and
Yeah.
and then people with super big heads, like Rottweiler humans and such.
So he would take this sharp ice pick like instrument and he would insert it above the patient's eyeball through the orbital of the eye. Now, there are very thin structured bones behind the orbital. They're not as thick as the rest of our skull, but there are bones back there that I would imagine a break in the orbital bone would need some kind of medical intervention. But he would eye open, stick it in behind the eye, and he would bang it into the depth, and then he would move the instrument back and forth.
Give it a little wiggle, 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 wiggle.
Then he would do it on the other side. So his ice pick lobotomy became wildly popular. Now, the main reason
Wives were trying it at home on their husbands.
the main reason is people were desperate for treatments for serious mental
And
illness.
People came in asking for this.
Yes, they were begging.
It was often they asked for it, and it would leave them in a semi-vegetative state.
And we have to remember, this is before antipsychotic medication had been invented. I don't want to say invented, but it had been, I guess, tried on the public, because for centuries antipsychotics have been used in tribes and other things, but it had not been synthesized for a public use at this time, and mental asylums were inarguably overcrowded at this time.
They were. Okay. News story real quick.
Break it up a little bit.
So up in Washington, this happened on the 18th. A guy's SUV kept overheating, Betsy.
Oh no.
He was out of water. It was getting to be a burden to have to stop and let it, cool down. Or, humana. So what this guy did, he drove his SUV into the river. Submerged it into the river. Now,
He's a problem solver.
he is a problem solver. Now, what happened after that is it kills the engine. So then you can't drive it out. So we'll read it. The weird incident happened Tuesday after drivers and witnesses spotted a blue Suburban submerged in the Yakima River near Century Landing. Emergency crews were called out to the scene along with Yakima County Sheriff's deputies. Authorities found the owner of the vehicle nearby and learned the truth of the matter. The driver intentionally sank his SUV into the river. He told authorities that he did it so he could get some water into the radiator. As for the vehicle, it has been towed out of the river. No word on what happened after the incident. Now,
do you think that's legitimate? Or
Well-
do you think he was like, come up with an idea? Okay, how am I going to get out of this? Because sometimes, like, I'm driving down there, I'm like, what if I, what if he like gave in to one of those impulses, and then he was like, oh shit, okay, what do I tell him?
well, if he did it, if he did it as one of those lack of impulse controls, that would be better. I mean, this is, how hard can it be to transport water from a river to your vehicle? All you need is something that can hold water. You could do it with your t-shirt.
Really? I mean,
But
a little ingenuity
to
would get you
sink it-
right to the point of filling it up.
To sink it into the river, I mean, once it sucks air, it's done. Once the electrics touch water, once it sucks water, electrics clog the exhaust.
It's a hell of a way to destroy your vehicle.
Now, granted, his vehicle may run again,
Sure.
but it's going to take some effort.
Sure. And a lot of money.
Yes, and a lot of money. Should we go through some comments real quick?
I've been responding to them.
Have you?
Yep. Hi,
All right.
guys. Grandma and Amy are listening.
Yes.
Christy, Kim, James.
Our grandma's here. Christy, yes. Hello, Grandma. Good to see you.
Grandma would have been alive during lobotomies.
Yeah, we were both alive during lobotomies. Grandma would have been like well and alive. during
Yeah. I wonder,
lobotomies.
Grandma, did you know anybody who got a lobotomy? That's an interesting question. So, lobotomies weren't just for adults either. That's another thing to take into consideration. One of the youngest patients was a 12-year-old boy.
Man, that kid acts up. I'm gonna get him.
NPR went on to interview him. Howard Doley in 2006 was the age of 56 at the time, and he was working as a bus driver. Now, Doley told NPR, if you saw me, you'd never know I'd had a lobotomy. The only thing you'd notice is that I'm very, very tall and about 350 pounds. Now, we don't know if what they did inside there directly relates to his size, but he is an imposing figure.
Well, if they would have struck the pituitary gland,
Yes.
that controls your growth.
That's a question he's had his whole life. He says, I've always felt different. It's like I couldn't figure it out, so I wondered if something's missing from my soul. Now, I don't have any memory of the operation, and I never really had the courage to ask my family about it. Now, Doley's lobotomy was initiated by his stepmother, Lou, who said Doley was defiant. Really? Have you never met a 12-year-old boy? He daydreamed and even objected going to bed.
I'll hold my shock.
A lobotomy. Now, Doley's father did his due diligence, took him to several doctors who said nothing's wrong with him. He's just a normal boy. But Freeman agreed to perform the lobotomy based on this initial information. Amy says, I think it's just all in his head. I think you're right. So Freeman agreed to do this lobotomy based on this. And we have to recognize all the various reasons that lobotomies were done. Depression, anxiety, insomnia. These don't have to all be together. Even one of these presenting itself could get you a lobotomy. Melancholy. Oh, You're just not excited. You're just relaxed.
Eeyore got his
Dad would have gotten a lobotomy for melancholy.
well, imagine Eeyore. Pin the
Yeah.
tail on the donkey would have been totally different.
And then defiance.
Yeah, teenage boys.
And, if you were defiant to your husband, lobotomy.
Oh, I still agree with that. We should bring some of them back, Betsy. I don't think we need to outlaw all lobotomies.
Listen, let's reevaluate this. Yeah. So
Can they still cook after?
1967, Freeman performed his last lobotomy before being banned from doing this procedure. After he performed the third lobotomy, so some people didn't just get one. This patient had come back in for her third lobotomy, and she developed a brain hemorrhage and passed away. Her family was the catalyst that pushed to have the ban on lobotomies done, because they said it was irresponsible. Like he performed 3. The first 2 did nothing except leave her mentally ill. So he went in for a third try and she passed away. So they banned it. Now, according to sources, the exact number of lobotomies in the U.S., the majority of them taking place between 1940s and 1950, is somewhere between 40 and 50,000 in 10 years. They were being performed at large. The U.S., as mentioned before, performed more lobotomies than any other country. Curiously, as early as the 1950s, some nations, including Germany and Japan, had outlawed lobotomies. The Soviet Union prohibited the procedure in 1950, stating that it was contrary to the principles of humanity. One more time for the people in the back. The Soviet Union prohibited the procedure 30 years before it was prohibited here, stating that it was contrary to the principles of humanity.
Yeah, the place that did a planned starvation.
Yes. Now, just because Freeman was banned from doing it for his little third try did not in any way stop lobotomies from taking place. Now, some people would wonder how a practice where you are basically jamming an ice pick behind someone's eye and tearing apart connections in their brain would become so popular. Like, how did this happen? While it did reach fad status eventually, at first the real point of it was to help people suffering from schizophrenia and other severe mental illnesses. It wasn't until it reached this fad status that they were using it for all kinds of things, like, weight loss, lobotomy. The doctors who approved the lobotomy operation didn't know all the risks and were performing brain surgery without being able to see what they were doing. But many, arguably, were likely still doing it for the right reasons. This is something in my brain that I spend a lot of time pondering. Are people evil, or do good people do evil things for the right reasons?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
Do you think petty tyrants are doing it because they think they're doing evil, or do you think they do it because they think they're doing good?
There may be some Dr. Evils out there who are just like evil.
It could be both. I mean,
yeah.
Last year we had some patients thrown into retirement homes, which is the group that is most at hazard. And they were done on orders from the government. Do you think that the government was doing it to be evil, or do you think they thought that was the best solution for the problem?
I question this all the time. Is it intentional, or is it negligent? Or is it because you don't have the intellect to work through the problem and see the outcome? I don't know. It's probably all of the above.
It's a tough one.
But these doctors that were performing these 40 to 50,000, we have to recognize that they were visiting these asylums and they were seeing the day-to-day horror shows that were happening to these patients inside these asylums. Now, back then, the asylums were overcrowded. There was no antipsychotics to like calm the patient down. They were understaffed. They were filthy places. The patients were often neglected. This procedure, I'm sure, was being sold to them that it could help lead them to a life that would be better for them out of the asylum. The patients often in these asylums had to be restrained like prisoners in straitjackets and put in padded rooms. And because we didn't have any drugs at the time to calm them down effectively, it was sleep or awake. That was the deal. Patients had to be forcibly controlled and physically restrained. So we also had this physical aspect. These patients were being physically assaulted in these asylums, and the doctors going in and out of these asylums day to day, in and out, I'm sure we're seeing just the tragedy that was happening in there, and all the while being told by neuroscientists that this could resolve that. I'm sure that led to a lot of it.
And some more news real quick.
Yeah, more news.
So imagine going to a kid's party and you're going to see alligators. And this happened again in Utah. Utah, we've surpassed
We've
Florida.
risen to the cream of the
We're
crop.
there.
Yes.
We're there. Wild footage shows powerful alligator named Darth Gator snapping a hold of his handler and yanking her in the water at a Utah kids party. And then a heroic parent leaps in to wrestle the gator.
Someone
so that she could
give that
escape.
guy a medal.
Yeah, and the employee too. Yeah, I mean, she's playing with alligators. She's a tough chick. So I think we should.
Or is she just intellectually challenged? Therein lies the question again.
Okay. Yes. So we're gonna throw this up on screen for those watching, and we'll have a little bit of sound.
Kind of boring for 1 second, but then once it's in the
Turn the
water,
sound down.
And this is not an easy video to watch.
Okay, these are all little kids, right? And the lady, Lindsay, is trying to feed him, and he comes up underneath her arm and he gets a hold of her hand. She got a little bold.
She follows her training and jumps in the water because she knows what's next. It's going to roll.
Yeah, it starts rolling, so she grabs onto it. Now here comes the dad, one of the dads or a bold uncle. He jumps in there and he's trying to hold
he crocodile hunters this alligator.
He did. He jumped right on its back. If he doesn't say crikey at the end of this, he has failed. Right? So he's trying to hold the alligator from rolling. And it's got her hand. I don't know how they're going to get out of that.
Now, the trainer does know what she's doing. You can tell that she's worked with alligators a lot because she understands that alligator is going to rip her arm off if she is not free and in the water.
Or drag her into the water and drown her, whatever else alligators do. But it has got a hold of her hand.
What's interesting to me is this particular part of the video. It's about 1 minute and 26 seconds in. The trainer, whose arm is now trapped inside the alligator's mouth, is resting her head on her other hand.
I think that's to keep her head out of the water.
She's like thinking through this, and they're asking her, what do we do next? And she's like talking through it, and she's telling the guy, just hold the alligator down at the count of 1, 2, whatever. I'm going to release.
And then my favorite part, Dad is left in there.
He's
wrestling
like, okay,
an alligator.
All right, now what? Nobody gave me the game plan for what's next.
Yeah.
So the trainer leans in. She is hurt. This alligator is like wrestling to get this guy off of the top of him who has no training.
Yeah. So she's giving him instructions.
She's giving him instructions. Sit up. Now, one thing to know about alligators is the force that they bite down with is extremely strong, but the force they open up with is, I guess,
Not
in
as strong.
comparison, weak to what their bite force is. So she was telling him to hold the jaws closed and then put yourself into a sitting position and then jump out of the water. That dude is my freaking hero.
That dude's pretty awesome. Everyone needs to meet him at the bar, buy him all the beer.
I'm telling you, if he doesn't receive something for saving that woman's life,
and he didn't hesitate, ran and jumped in and
who are you?
Bear hugged.
Are you Batman? Yeah. I would have been like, oh no, what do we do? What do we do? He come around the edge and was just jumped in the water.
Jumped in. Bold man, bold move.
Hero. If you're listening, I salute you.
Yeah. And Lindsay, I think you did a good job too.
She's a great, she's a great animal. She's a great alligator trainer.
I would suggest
these
next
things
time,
happen.
Crisco on the hand. That way it slides out
Slippery.
of its mouth.
Okay, back to lobotomy.
Back to fun.
Freeman, who developed
This
the
show is
lobotomy,
making me sweat.
Yeah.
Just thinking, because some of these people volunteered, but like that kid.
Yeah.
I mean, could you imagine you're 12 and mom or a dad and stepmom are driving you to the doctor saying, yeah,
we're going to fix this defiance. So Freeman had noted that his newly developed lobotomy was surgically inducing childhood. And he then went on to theorize that the lack of many normal mental capabilities, the distraction, the stupefaction, and all the other issues were because the patient was regressing to a younger mental age. And he didn't theorize that it would be permanent damage caused to the personality by his butchering. Rather, his line of thought took him to that the patient would then be able to start maturing again appropriately.
Start over fresh.
Yes.
Reset button, if you will.
He even suggested that two parents hold down and spank the adult lobotomized patient if she gave them trouble, and that they should give her ice cream and kisses afterwards to help restart that progression into adulthood. We're talking 60-year-old, 30-year-old lobotomized daughter. He lobotomizes her. He says, oh, she's being childlike. She's not. I haven't scrambled her brain. She's just being childlike. Start over. When she misbehaves, whack her, hold her whole adult body down, and spank her so that you can retrain her into adulthood.
And, well, what does the rest of the life of this individual become?
Now,
I mean, if you're a parent, I want you to think about this. That Dolly kid, he come out okay, functions by himself. But say some of them didn't go so well, and they become, even if they go the way they plan, but they become like a vegetable.
What was later discovered is that this induced childhood, so to speak, rarely faded with time, and instead often crippled the person mentally and emotionally for the rest of their life.
And that means you as a parent, guess what? Get to be a parent forever. Good job.
So another thing that happened to lobotomized patients that helped validate this theory that they were childlike is they would, in I think it was 90-something%, would become incontinent. You'd be lobotomized, incontinent. Dolly talked about that even as an adult.
He just had hard times controlling his bowel movements and his.
Dolly talked about having the propensity for impulsivity that has wrecked his life. Trouble paying attention, wrecked his life. Angry outbursts, wrecked his life. Now, what we really saw is that people would be fundamentally altered from who they may have been or who they were, and it wasn't in a good way. because being calm is not necessarily a good outcome, but he was recording it as a good outcome. Being in a vegetative state is calm.
Yeah. Comas are calm.
Now, one thing to think about today, before you get any major mental or physical treatments, doctors have to first make sure to inform you fully of what's going to happen, what the risks and complications are, except for if you're getting an experimental vaccine. In other cases, you have to know these are the risks, you could die, blah, blah, blah. You need to be able to show you have full mental faculties to make the decision. However, back when lobotomy held sway, people didn't have these rights.
Yeah.
And informed consent pretty much didn't exist.
Yep.
For a couple of reasons. One, the patient had been admitted into an asylum and deemed incompetent. They were too far removed.
I got a question. In mental health facilities today, can they treat you without your consent? Or do they have to get consent to treat you with anything beyond just something to calm you down?
You have to be deemed incompetent legally. So there's a legal procedure. So even if you're yellow carded.
So then do they hand the consent over to a family member of the state?
Yeah, normally your rights, I guess you would say, are given to next of kin. If there is nobody who is willing or able to take that, then the state assigns somebody to do that for you,
like a guardian,
an advocate to do that for you. Now, to make matters worse, if a patient had already agreed and tried to back out at the last minute, the doctor would ensure that they got the operation, even if they had to sedate them.
It's like, go kidnap him at home.
Yeah.
Bring him in. You see this paper you signed 5 days ago?
So in many cases, people were being forced to the procedure against their will by doctors and family members that may not have been malicious, but were arguably irresponsible.
Yeah. Well, and for depression.
Yeah.
Honestly, a better outcome would have been had they given them a treadmill.
Yes. A better diet, a quiet place to think with some meditation.
A dog that takes them on a drag once in a while. Honestly, exercise is a lot better than lobotomy for depression.
So while Moniz preferred more medical forms of the procedure and was a bit more reticent, it was proven throughout Freeman's reign of terror that he really wanted to use it on anyone who wanted one or wanted one for their family member. He would give lobotomies for migraines.
That'll fix you.
Mild retardation. He would lobotomize them. Any chance he got to stick an ice pick in.
Was his thoughts on someone who had Down syndrome, was his thoughts that then they could reset that?
Yeah.
He really thought that they could reverse a
Yeah.
chromosomal issue with mutilating the frontal lobe.
Yeah. Because he thought that everything was organic.
That boy was, he was the definition of all he had was a hammer.
So here's one that I found that I don't know.
Well, anyways, go on with the.
After World War II, there was a huge influx of soldiers coming back from the war with traumatic experiences. Obviously.
Shell shock, PTSD.
There was not at the time, and I would say probably not even now, much of a mental health care system that actually took care of them. Instead of taking the time and attempt to treat and rehabilitate, 2,000 soldiers were given lobotomies upon their return. Like, is there no other way to thank these guys for all of their sacrifices? Many were given them against their will. Now, as Jared can attest to, you don't have much of a will in the Army. Most of your decisions are made for you. Vaccines, food, all those things included. So many of these were given against their will. And just like civilian victims of the lobotomy, Many of them received the treatment for absurd things like depression, PTSD, and the big one, homosexuality. They were lobotomizing soldiers for homosexuality.
Well, that's just, I mean, we should bring that back today. Good hell.
Now,
it's insane. It is insane. Well, and I mean, there's a reason militaries like to nab up boys that are 18.
well, because you can maul them into whatever you want. They're malleable.
I took an oath to defend the Constitution. Didn't understand it. All these things. Now, granted, I never had to, do anything outside of the bounds of the Constitution, but I still took an oath to something I didn't understand and didn't learn to understand it until after I'd already been out of the military for a very long time.
Many of these soldiers were sent home with a very disturbing informational pamphlet. I couldn't find a copy of it, but I did find the verbiage. This pamphlet was an explanation for their families on how to take care of their now permanently brain damaged relative. It said that in the pamphlet. It's very long. It was like 6 or 7 pages of trifold, and it describes possible scenarios and advice. It explains in great detail that the lobotomized family member will lose interest in things easily, stare off into space, speak inappropriately, act like a child, be listless and difficult to manage. Despite this person having gone through extreme trauma, having recently fought in a war, and having just received brain surgery, it makes it clear that you absolutely must not allow the person to rest, relax, or sleep in at all. It also goes on to say that the person will basically from this point on need constant attention for the rest of his or her life.
Thank you for your service, gentlemen.
How is this better than PTSD? How? Now, the lobotomy is considered...
You know what the sad thing is? He probably still has PTSD on top of that.
100%, but he can't express it because he's listless, stares off into space, and speaks childlike. The lobotomy is considered today to be an absurd and barbaric procedure from when we didn't know what we were doing. But like mentioned before, it's pretty embarrassingly recent. We would like to think that lobotomy disappeared because we collectively came to our senses. But in actuality, it was simply displaced by a more effective treatment.
Effective and easier.
Aside from the people like Freeman, who zealously pushed it as a life's obsession, many doctors were particularly comfortable with the procedure, but they did it when they felt like there was nothing else that would work. Once psychotropic drugs started to come into play, the lobotomy started to quickly lose popularity. A new drug, Thorazine, started to take home, and it was first called a chemical lobotomy. The main thing most creditable doctors were using the lobotomy for was the treatment of serious psychotic symptoms. Some things Thorazine excelled at. While the lobotomy was used to treat other disorders, it was no longer being used so widely for schizophrenia, and it simply could not sustain popularity. People had moved on to treating mental health problems with drugs. Now, Thorazine, if you know anything about it, is a chemical lobotomy. It's not used today because of its widely known side effects. But it would create permanent brain damage. It is found in pesticides and all other things. So it effectively was a chemical lobotomy. And oftentimes we hear that saying, we moved on from this not because collectively we came to our senses, but because something else replaced it.
Oh, I want to do some happy news.
Lobotomies.
Okay. Well, hold on.
That's all about lobotomies that I have.
There's still some more.
Oh, but we do need to talk about a few notable
people. But before we do that, we got that quick story. At Lagoon.
Oh my gosh.
That 32-year-old man who, I don't know. They're still investigating it, and he was on the Sky Train or Sky Ride. It's a gondola system, much like you'd find at a ski park. And there's pictures and videos of him out there hanging off of it, and he fell 50 feet, went to the hospital in critical condition, and he has passed. But some of the stories you hear is that the guy was like hanging off it doing chin-ups and then got tired.
Yep. The videos that have surfaced,
yeah,
they have clipped to, very short, but there were at first many videos that were full length, or as full length as you could get, because the Sky Ride, you pass one another. I've been on it many times.
Yeah, it's just like a gondola.
And so you just
I used to scare my sisters on it. I'd get into the one behind them, and I would kick my legs, and it'd make me bounce, which then make them bounce. And then from 20 feet away, they would turn their heads over their shoulders and yell at me for the 45 minutes it takes to ride the ride. But it sounds like he was trying to show off.
There have been reports that he was also intoxicated.
Yes. And then people are saying, well, why did they let him on? The kid running the ride that's saying, step forward, is probably 17. You don't want 17-year-olds engaging in verbal arguments with 32-year-olds. So do they sell alcohol at Lagoon? I don't think they do.
They do not. But you can bring in coolers, and
so now they're just going to start inspecting those. I don't know.
And people have been known to bring in alcohol, and not that I'm against, having a few drinks and going on a ride, but I think that in his case, his stacking of bad decisions, unfortunately cost him his life.
I know how to do this. Before they get on it, they've got to, on the one side, get on the teacups,
spin them up,
and on the other side, get on that
the scrambler, or
the one that goes
gravitron,
whatever it is that has the spinny, and get on those. And that's how you do an alcohol test. If he's still holding it in after that,
throws it up,
it's good to go. And if people beneath him or on the outside of him get corn bath, he doesn't get to go on the gondola. You're welcome, Lagoon.
Corn bath, that's gross.
And then my last story before we go to notable
they're
folks.
So
now,
cute.
This story is a bath. It's to wash off some of this grossness that has come out today. So French Zoo releases new pictures of 2-week-old panda twins. They are alive and energetic. Now, for those watching, you can see the panda twins on the screen. And for those listening, I'm going to take a minute to break them down. They are teeny tiny. They are very cute. They look like they've got their pink is the dominant color of them, but their legs, and it looks like they wear a crop top with long sleeves, is black. So their color comes from their skin, and then they've got black rings around their eyes, and their hair is like little piglet hair. It's like fuzzy on top of pink. But they are
twin
super
pandas
cute.
is a big accomplishment, considering
We've had a hard time. Humans have had a hard time breeding pandas.
Yeah, considering the trials that we've been through to have pandas in captivity.
Yeah, but it says that they're alive, they're healthy, they're wiggly, and everything else. And for those watching, you get the treat of seeing
they're pretty cute,
these little pandas. And I look forward to seeing them as toddler pandas.
Pandas crack me up. They have the funniest personalities.
Yep. Them and those red raccoon bears.
Yeah.
Those ones, they're just funny, but they're fat and roly-poly. But yeah, good job, France, on bringing forth the fun
twin pandas,
baby pandas to us. All right, notable people who have had lobotomies to close the show out, and then we'll read whatever comments that come in.
Eva Perón Don't cry for me, Argentina.
Eva Perón.
Had a
Holy-
lobotomy and then died several weeks later.
Oh my gosh! All right.
Now it is theorized that she was suffering from cervical cancer, and it is theorized that the lobotomy was performed as a way to disconnect the pain receptors.
Yeah. Took care of that.
And although she survived the lobotomy for several months, she did succumb to who knows what. But Eva Perón, she was an amazing person. As far as her determination and motivation and will, and although the things she did were not always correct, she really was this strong.
Another one of those petty tyrants. Was she doing it for good or evil?
Yeah, she was a strong personality. So, Rosemary Kennedy, famous one.
Okay, yes, Rosemary Kennedy. She was promiscuous.
Yep, she was having sex with boys.
Old Joe couldn't have that.
Yeah. So she underwent a prefrontal lobotomy.
It's John Kennedy's younger sister.
Yeah.
I think she was 3 years younger than John Kennedy. She had her teenage years. She was promiscuous and wild, had a rich daddy that was tied into the mafia. She started going on dates a lot. And so he had her lobotomized and then locked her in the attic.
So her operation was performed by Walter Freeman, the gentleman we spoke about.
Hero.
The conscious Rosemary was under an anesthetic and asked to recite the Lord's Prayer and other easily recalled things while the doctor cut into the brain. They continued until Rosemary could no longer respond coherently, at which point they declared operation complete.
Success.
Now, she left the operating table with the mental capacity of a 2-year-old and was immediately put into a long-term care facility, and Joe had to go home and explain it to his wife.
Yep.
Now,
and
the rest of her life,
sons,
she remained institutionalized.
Yeah, she never regained anything. They just locked her up.
Alice Roby.
Don't know who that is.
She is, she was born in Saint Sevier, Quebec City, in Montreal, Canada. By the time she was 12, she was a well-known child performer and singer. And she lost all of that due to her. She appeared in lots of Hollywood movies and things, but she underwent a lobotomy. It was done at the behest of her father and without her consent. And although they deemed it successful, she too arrived at the end of that.
Oh, Britney Spears is free. Just throwing it out there.
Just throwing it out there.
Speaking of celebrities with wonderful fathers, loving fathers.
Rose Williams, the sister of American playwright Tennessee Williams, devoted much of his life to her care following her lobotomy. Let's see. Yosef Hasid, he was a professional musician. This was in England, He was performing regularly in London, and he actually died as it induced convulsions. And the doctors at the time believed that the convulsions were beneficial.
Oh, yes.
And so they were like, yes, we've done it.
Yeah,
and
shaking, drooling, and blood are all positive notes in that surgery.
Yeah, there's quite a few notable people.
The Kennedy one is the one that I obviously know the most about. Actually, JFK, John Kennedy, kind of made a big deal out of it. It wasn't like he spoke about it all the time on the pulpit, but he made a big deal out of it in life. And Robert did as well. Another one that Freeman did, if I'm correct, was his wife.
Yes, he did. He lobotomized her. Now, he went on to say that she was much easier to deal with, but nobody's actually ever interviewed her. His
wife would complain that he never come home from the office. So
lobotomy.
He lobotomized her. I'm telling you.
Jared's
might not be a bad idea to bring back the days when you told that wife. No, just kidding. But anyways, yeah, he lobotomized his wife because she felt overwhelmed at home. They had it wasn't just that. I'm driven back. They had 2 children, 2 sons. One of them drowned in a river, and his wife was depressed over it.
Yep.
And he, instead of him bonding with the family to come over this grief and loss, he started staying at work, and he would stay there for days at a time. When I say not come home, like not come home for days at a time. He actually started drinking extra for a little while. I don't think that stayed long. And I do think that he, I don't know. I'm not going to go into stuff I can't verify, but she complained about him not coming home. So it's not that he went from putting in 12 hours a day in the office to 14 and that bummed her out. He would be gone for 4 days or a week at a time. So he brought her into his office. She escaped the first time. He brought her back, and his story is that she voluntarily let it happen. But there's a lot of questions as to whether it was voluntary, because the story sounds sketchy, like he forced his wife to be lobotomized. He did it.
Other interesting and notable ones. Most of us won't recognize the name, but there are a lot of royal family who received lobotomies, and they were done for mostly the same reasons. They exhibited a propensity for throwing tantrums, spoiled rich kid attitude. And one in particular, the 13th Earl of Galloway, at the age of 23 in 1952, his parents told him to prepare for a trip to the South. And believing he was going off on a holiday, he packed for an extended stay. Instead, he underwent a lobotomy.
Yeah, you don't want to,
And he never fully recovered either.
I don't think a lot of them did. I think the one that did the most, and why there's so much interview. I mean, there's books written about that Dilly kid.
Dolly, yep.
Yeah, Dolly, because he's the one who, not many other people actually carried on with a functioning life after that.
Yep. Yeah, lobotomies. It is a stain in American history, well, world history.
Mm-hmm.
There's a ton of pictures online of lobotomies because, like I said, it was a fad. It was a fad. People wanted it so bad. And 40 to 50,000 people is nothing to scoff at. That's a large number of people who.
That's a Chicago Bears stadium game.
Yeah.
To put that in perspective, the importance of that. That's a lot of people. And the worst part are the reasons they did them. Promiscuity of a teenager. There could have been more ways to do that. You could have done so many other things, but they shut her life down.
You could have done anything other than that.
Yep.
I mean, I don't want to believe that people can be led so stupidly to slaughter, but I know that is an actual truth.
Well,
and it happens all the time.
It came out of the same scientists, the same.
It was the perfect storm.
Technocrats. There's a story written, a fictional movie written. Heinlein wrote it, but he has a fictional past laid in, and it may be situations like this where he got the idea, but he called it the revolt of the scientists, where technocracy took over, and there's no humanity left in it when that happens. And I think this is a good example of that. We talked about Nazi Germany as a good example of that. When humanity is lost for science, I think we've crossed the line.
Yeah.
So while we finish out, I just want to real quick show the baby pandas again, because
just to wash it off.
They are cute. And then I want to lay out a message to my fellow veterans right now.
Yes.
Especially the veterans of the Middle East and Afghanistan as a whole, but also the guys in Iraq and everything else. Now, I when I was never served in a wartime theater. I was luckily, during a time where there wasn't any war going on. And I know you guys did, and you guys paid a huge sacrifice. And I'm sure a lot of you right now are wondering for what and feeling like what you saw and did was for nothing. And I want to implore on you that what you did in the moment was for the guy standing next to you. You have been betrayed by politicians.
Yeah.
You have been betrayed by the guys who sent you there. But your heroism was for those guys in your unit, for the guys in the foxhole next to you or in the piece of equipment next to you, the guys that you joked with, and all those things we did when we carried on and did, the funny stuff. That's what you did it for. And it's not any failure on your part that this has happened. And I'm not going to argue whether there were better ways that this stuff could have happened. There are obviously out there, but I'm not smart enough to know those. But all I can say is if you need to reach out, if I can help, if I can talk to you, I'll gladly do it anytime, day or night, or find someone, get in contact with your buddies from the unit or talk to your family. There are also veterans of further past wars that are on your side right now.
The way you fought for that person next to you, it may be time for you to fight for yourself like that right now.
Yeah.
So reach out.
Yep. All right. Thank you for joining us.
Have a great week.
Yes.